Hey there, everyone. I'm Errol Barnett, joining you tonight from the CBS Broadcast Center here in New York City. It's great to be with you. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's a quick look at the top stories we're watching for you right now. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi touched down in Taiwan today in defiance of both the White House and the Chinese government, the diplomatic fallout, and how she's justifying the trip. New questions after the killing of highly sought-after terrorist leader Ayman Al-Zawahiri, what we know about his life in Afghanistan and the future of Al-Qaeda. More rainstorms and high winds bring the additional threat of falling trees and mudslides to eastern Kentucky, also complicating rescue and recovery efforts, a lack of cell phone service. More on that coming up. Today marks one of the most significant dates on the calendar. 5 states hold primaries today. You got tons of outside money, competing endorsements of the former president and vice president, and we have all of it covered. Plus, Arizona is almost ground zero for a battle between former President Trump and the former vice president. Karen Taylor Robeson joins us to discuss the power of endorsements and what election integrity really means. But first, we begin with Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan. The House Speaker arrived on the self-governed island earlier today, this visit raising tensions between the U.S. and China. She's the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit Taiwan in 25 years. The move has angered China, which claims the island as its own. She shared this after landing, saying, quote, "Our visit reiterates that America stands with Taiwan, a robust, vibrant democracy, and our important partner in the Indo-Pacific." For more on this, Ohio Congressman Mike Turner joins us. He is the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Representative Turner, thank you for your time today. Beijing's already announced military maneuvers in response to the House Speaker's visit. How concerned are you this trip could potentially spark a military incident?
Well, I think it's certainly very important that Nancy Pelosi stood up to the pressure and went to Taiwan. She most recently, has been meeting with Zelensky in Kyiv, and now she's gone to Taiwan. And I think, as you read, it has properly phrased this as a battle for democracy, where we have new aggression that's coming from both China and Russia. I think what's going to be important, if you look at her op-ed that she just published in the Washington Post, about the reason why she went, and that this is a new battle in order to be able to support democracy. I'm looking forward when she comes back to Washington, because we have a lot of work to do. I think this is a great opportunity for her to turn now to how do we scope the military that we need? How do we fund the military? Currently, the House under Nancy Pelosi's leadership has a $70 billion cut to defense that we're going to have to overcome. Cuts to our nuclear weapons systems, while China is rebuilding and modernizing, expanding its nuclear weapons systems. So I think, her statements of that we need to defend democracy are a great opportunity for us to turn to the debate to how do we now strengthen our national security so that we can help others.
So there's an important diplomatic message, but there are also threats and risks associated with this trip. Why take the trip now?
Well, apparently this was a trip that she'd been planning for some time and had not been able to go. I think, certainly you've seen, strong support in Congress from everyone, on the Senate side and the House side to say, no, we should not bend to China, and no member of Congress should be told where they can and cannot go by the aggressive state of China, by the Communist Party, or by Russia itself, as she showed when she went to meet with Zelensky in Kyiv. I think what's more important, though, as we look to the diplomacy, which really we need to see more from the Biden administration, they need to be standing up to China. They stopped the China initiative because they thought it was too provocative to China. There are a number of areas where they have scaled back efforts to try to hold China accountable for what they're doing and threatening their neighbors and threatening the United States. But there's an opportunity here. As she comes back to the United States, we need to focus on what do we need to do to strengthen our military so that these threats from these countries can be deterred.
But let's be clear, the United States does look the other way for certain countries when it's in their interest. President Biden was just meeting the Crown Prince there in the Saudi Kingdom, and the allegations of its human rights record are extensive. What is the United States' strategic benefit to ally itself with Taiwan?
Well, first off, this is not an issue of human rights solely. This is an issue also of national security threats and threats to our allies. China's been threatening Japan. We have a nuclear North Korea that's threatened South Korea only because of Japan. Japan is threatening Taiwan. These are autocratic states that are threatening democracies. Saudi Arabia is not threatening the United States, not threatening our allies. You also have Russia, who's killing innocent people children, as Nancy Pelosi said in her own statement. Innocent families are being slaughtered by Russia and Ukraine. These are issues where Ukraine is a democracy, Russia is not, where we need to stand up for democracy. That's what she said correctly. Now we need to turn back to make sure that we have the military to back up the strong statements that she's been making around the world.
I want to also get your thoughts on the killing of Al-Qaeda leader Ayman Al-Zawahiri. You wrote in a statement, quote, President Biden claimed Al-Qaeda was gone from Afghanistan. This strike tells us otherwise. You raise an important point. I mean, Al-Qaeda is supposed to be a shell of what it was decades ago. What threat do you feel it still poses to Americans?
Well, all of these terrorist organizations are self-declared adversaries. I mean, they have declared the United States and our allies as their targets. Now, these are the President of the United States' words. He specifically said that his justification for leaving Afghanistan in the hectic, haphazard way that he did that let Afghanistan fall to the Taliban, that the reason he was leaving is because Al-Qaeda is gone. And then now the administration is taking a victory lap of having killed the head of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. So clearly the president's own words show that they're not true this evening.
So which is it? Are they a threat, an ongoing threat, and a risk to us all, or not?
They are absolutely a threat, and they are a self-declared threat. And the president, in the manner in which he left Afghanistan, has left it to an area that can continue to have threats against our nation grow. We've not seen evidence of the over-horizon holding terrorism and holding the Taliban at bay that the president had promised. We've seen this one very well planned, very well thought out. The intelligence community did a phenomenal job of identifying his location and taking him out. But his presence clearly shows that what the president said was not true. Al-Qaeda is not gone, and they're not gone from Afghanistan.
Make a very good point. Congressman Mike Turner, really great to get your insight on these top stories. We appreciate it. Voters are heading to the polls for primary elections today. It's underway in 5 states. You've heard us speak about this all day. Arizona, Michigan, Missouri, Kansas, and Washington. One of the most watched races is the Senate GOP primary in Missouri. The state's former governor, Eric Greitens, is facing Missouri's Attorney General, Eric Schmitt. Former President Trump said he was endorsing Eric in a statement yesterday. And of course, there are two Erics in the race. He hasn't clarified which one he really supports. In Kansas, abortion access is on the ballot. It's the first state to vote on the issue since the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade. For more on this, CBS News political director Fin Gomez joins me now. They're from our Washington bureau. Fin, always great to see you. You know this.
You too.
Do we have any clarity on the Eric former President Trump is endorsing in that contest?
Yeah, well, Errol, I spoke to some Republican sources close to Trump who tell me that Trump intentionally meant to play both sides by not stating an actual last name in his endorsement yesterday. 2 of those Republican contenders, as you mentioned, are both named Eric. State Attorney General Eric Schmitt, who has been leading in most polls, and disgraced former Governor Eric Greitens. Both Erics, as you stated, claim the endorsement. But who knows? Trump may have been referring to his son Eric Trump, but we'll see how those results turn out. It's supposed to be a pretty tight race, but again, Schmitt was in the lead in polls leading up to today's vote.
Representative Peter Meijer faces a tough primary against Trump-backed challenger in Michigan. He's one of a handful of Republicans who voted to impeach the former president. What is your sense from where the energy is right now? Do those votes seem to be costly to those Republicans or not?
In a word, emphatically, yes. Trump encouraged his supporters, even today on his social media site, to, quote, knock out impeachment slime, referring to Meijer and Representatives Jamie Herrera Butler and Dan Newhouse. All 3 congressmen voted for impeachment following January 6th and are on the ballot today. They have been the target of the former president and his allies, and Meijer is now facing John Gibbs, who has been endorsed by Trump. And Errol, a new survey by CBS News showed that 57% of registered Republican voters say they are more likely to vote for a candidate who gets an endorsement from the former president. It's a significant hurdle for Meijer.
You know, it's a continuation of that sentiment that it is President Trump's GOP now. We're seeing this election after election, not universally, but certainly he's got the juice, the political juice here. Michigan's Democratic Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, is warning against any attempts to interfere with today's election. What led to that?
Errol, it's really getting interesting. She said Monday anyone attempting to interfere with the election process could be removed from polling places or potentially arrested. Benson has warned about bad actors who might interfere or mislead voters about election results. She said, quote, "We will not tolerate any attempts to disrupt our elections, any voter suppression or election interference attempts in Michigan," and said, simply follow the rules, follow the law. If that doesn't happen, there will be consequences. She also said that officials around the state are prepared for the possibility of disruptions and said the department will continue to combat misinformation about the legitimacy of the 2020 election results. Benson is also running for re-election as Secretary of State in Michigan and will likely be facing Republican opponent Christina Caramo, who has also been backed by Trump and who has been at the center of 2020 election denialism in Michigan. Also, I just wanted to add, just to sort of cite the heightened situation in Michigan, our political reporter Aaron Navarro has confirmed that the Michigan GOP election night watch party has been canceled after a bystander verbally assaulted a Republican staffer and threatened to shoot up a building, according to a Michigan Republican Party spokesperson. So we're watching that as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that late-breaking development. I want you to quickly take us to Kansas, though. Abortion on the ballot there. What's the proposed measure and the likelihood it will pass, and what is a historically conservative state?
Exactly, Errol. This is getting a lot of attention. As you mentioned, abortion access is on the ballot in Kansas. Following the Supreme Court's overturn of Roe v. Wade earlier in the summer, voters in Kansas will now decide whether to amend their state constitution and decide whether abortion access is protected by their constitution. The way the amendment is currently written, a yes vote affirms that there is no constitutional right to abortion. Kansas also has a Republican legislature, so if the amendment does pass, they are expected to restrict abortion access. Kansas is also the first state to vote on abortion rights, ahead of California, Kentucky, and also Vermont. And we are watching those results intently as well.
Yeah, there is a lot on the line tonight, Finn. Thank you so much.
A lot going on, Errol.
Yes,
a lot going on.
And you're not wrapping up the day just yet. We want to let our viewers know that they can stay with CBS News tonight for coverage of all these primaries at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll bring you a special roundup of the results anchored by our chief Washington correspondent, Major Garrett. The number of U.S. job openings has fallen below 11 million for the first time since last fall. Employment vacancies fell to 10.7 million in June, marking the lowest level since September of 2021. Now, despite the sharp decline, there are still more than 1.5 jobs open per available worker. The number of new hires in June remained consistent at 4.6 million. You see that there. Economists say the decline in job openings signifies a drop-off in the labor market as the U.S. economy struggles with inflation. President Biden announcing the death of Ayman Al-Zawahiri to the nation last night. What we know about what he was doing in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan and the threat Al-Qaeda may still pose to the world. Plus, the Russian trial of WNBA star Brittany Griner is slated to end within days with a potential sentence announced. The latest on that and the Biden administration's attempts to bring her home. You're streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the
And
past?
to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital.
We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News.
What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
American basketball player Brittany Griner was back in Russian court today for her ongoing drug possession trial. The 7-time WNBA All-Star has been wrongfully detained since February. She's pleaded guilty to carrying cannabis-infused vape cartridges, but says it was legally prescribed medical marijuana for chronic pain. During today's hearing, Griner's lawyers argued she was searched illegally and was not read her rights when arrested. Last week, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. has offered a substantial deal to Russia to secure the release of Griner and American Paul Whelan, who has been detained in Moscow since 2018. We're learning more about the U.S. drone strike that killed an Al-Qaeda leader who helped plan 9/11. President Biden says Ayman Al-Zawahiri was tracked to a fairly opulent home in downtown Kabul where he was hiding with his family when the strike was carried out by the CIA. Al-Zawahiri acted as Osama bin Laden's deputy for more than a decade and became Al-Qaeda's leader after bin Laden was killed by Navy SEALs back in 2011. I'm joined now by CBS senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge there in our D.C. Bureau. Catherine, one of the big details people are kind of digesting now is that the terror attacks were more than 2 decades ago. We've been told Al-Qaeda and its offshoots have been weakened and diminished since. But give us a bit of a reality check. What is the current threat level Al-Qaeda poses to U.S. national security, and how big of a threat was Zawahiri before he was killed?
Well, the White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, in a round of appearances earlier today, described Zawahiri as an active strategic threat to U.S. national security, someone who was very involved in setting the direction of the operations. And what's important here, Errol, is if you think back a decade when Zawahiri took control of the al-Qaeda franchise, he really went deep into hiding. There were rumors swirling that he was dead, yet here he is, less than a year after the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan, feeling so emboldened that he's living in a safe house in downtown Kabul, a part of the city, I know from my reporting, is just a stone's throw from the former U.S. Embassy as well as the presidential palace. So I think it really encapsulates how Al-Qaeda and its leadership has been very resilient over the years, but I think in the last year, since the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, really emboldened in this partnership with the Taliban.
And that makes it seem as if Al-Zawahiri was almost in plain sight in Kabul. Since the Taliban resume control of the country in the wake of the U.S.'s chaotic withdrawal, putting it mildly. What's the current tally of U.S. intelligence assets in the region?
Well, in this particular case, based on my reporting here at CBS News, intelligence officials used a technique called layering. And in simple terms, that means they take signals intelligence, so the communications of a target or those family members around them, and they couple that with aerial surveillance from drones so that they can establish a pattern of life. In this case, they came to understand that the Al-Qaeda leader would often go to a balcony at a certain type of day. That helps them develop a target set, and they had enough strong intelligence to be able to build a model of that safe house for President Biden to review and assess the risk and also assess the target itself and whether they could limit collateral damage in this case. The downside of this kind of over-the-horizon intelligence collection, that's sort of the technical term for it, is that you don't have that sort of crisp, real-time intelligence from human sources on the ground. You can have intelligence from human sources which may be somewhat dated or not quite immediate. And that's a problem because it's from that kind of really core intelligence that you set the parameters and the agenda for, for aerial surveillance, for drones and other types of collection. So the bottom line, this over-the-horizon intelligence collection really worked in this case, but it's much more challenging than having humans or boots on the ground to gather information for you.
But Catherine, you're getting me thinking, because if there was this over-the-horizon type of intelligence, because you don't have the immediate assets in the city, what's the flip side of that? What was the relationship between Al-Zawahiri and the Taliban, considering he was in a central part of Kabul, as you say, in a fairly opulent home?
Mm-hmm. I think it all comes down to timing and location. This is a part of the city which is heavily trafficked. It's a really sort of nice residential area, and it's a place where you can't really hide in plain sight. I'll put it in those terms. It's a place where you can set up shop if you feel very secure, very emboldened. And what that suggests, and this is coming from my military intelligence contacts, is that this relationship between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban is strong, and it may have remained strong for years, long enough that once the U.S. left Afghanistan, he felt he could come back into the capital and begin to really resume his operations in earnest. So it tells us the relationship which we invested so much capital, not only sort of weapons, money, but human capital to break apart after 9/11, to wipe out Taliban control and negate the safe haven. It really appears like this partnership has been able to survive and really sort of flourish in this post-U.S. withdrawal period in Afghanistan.
Despite the more than, $1 trillion the U.S. government has put towards its quote-unquote war on terror, a really stunning assessment. Thanks for helping us digest it all. Catherine Herridge joining us from Washington.
Of course.
A retired Washington police officer who was part of Donald Trump's motorcade says the former president was adamant about going to the Capitol on January 6th. Mark Robinson was in the lead car of Trump's motorcade during the insurrection and has previously testified before the House committee investigating January 6th. He says he heard about the former president's request to go to the Capitol through the Secret Service. Robertson told CNN Monday that when officials refused to let Mr. Trump join the rioters, it resulted in a heated argument in his limo. A proxy fight between the former president and vice president in a state where Republicans have been fractured by allegations of voter fraud over 2 years. Karen Taylor Robson, who enjoys endorsements from 2 Arizona governors, and Mike Pence joins us to discuss that and more. Plus, the most populous state in the country is declaring monkeypox a public health emergency, what it means for efforts to contain the virus, and why the U.S. has the highest caseload in the world. You're streaming CBS News.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
This is Red and Blue. I'm Errol Barnett. Here is a look at our top stories right now. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi arrived in Taiwan Tuesday despite warnings of retaliation from China. White House officials insist this trip does not change U.S. foreign policy regarding either country. Plus, at least 37 people have now died in Kentucky's severe flooding and hundreds remain unaccounted for. The region now faces high temperatures and humidity forecast through Thursday. And the Biden administration has named FEMA Administrator Robert Fenton as the nation's official monkeypox response coordinator. The virus is now in 48 states, with the majority of cases in New York, California, and in Illinois. Michael George has more from New York.
A line for the monkeypox vaccine stretched down the block early this morning in San Francisco. Some of those waiting say the government needs to do more.
More vaccines and testing everywhere.
Today, the Biden administration announced Robert Fenton, who ran the COVID vaccination effort for FEMA, will coordinate the federal monkeypox response. This as Illinois and California declared a state of emergency over the virus, following New York's lead.
I'm glad we have a state of emergency because the issue has always been how quickly we can get the resources, testing, vaccines, treatment that we need in the ER to contain this.
So what does declaring an emergency actually do? Well, it clears up some of the red tape to help fight the outbreak. For example, it authorizes more people to administer vaccines at sites like this health clinic. That's only part of the problem. While the administration is distributing 1.1 million doses, officials in California and New York say they don't yet have enough.
The order is now allowing more people to administer the vaccines, but you need more vaccines to start with.
In just 10 weeks, the U.S. outbreak has grown to at least 5,800 confirmed cases. Delays for vaccines and testing have been a problem.
For me personally, it took 2 weeks to get my test results. And that was something very, very frustrating.
Many of the infected are men who have sex with men, but anyone can catch monkeypox. It spreads primarily through skin-on-skin contact. While rarely fatal, it can be extremely painful. Michael George, CBS News, New York.
Arizonans are getting their final votes in for the midterm primaries today, and there are some major races we're following. Take a look at this. In the race for Senate, Republicans are deciding who will face off against Democratic Senator Mark Kelly in November. This will be a test of former President Trump's influence over the party, with Blake Masters, you see him on the left, securing President Trump's endorsement. In the race for governor, the GOP frontrunners are showcasing the deep divide between Mr. Trump and his former vice president. Former TV news anchor Kari Lake is supported by Mr. Trump, while Karen Taylor Robeson, who I'll be speaking with later in this program, has the backing of Mike Pence. Whoever wins that GOP primary is expected to face Arizona's Democratic Secretary of State Katie Hobbs for the governorship. Mr. Trump is also endorsing a candidate to fill Hobbs's seat, a job that oversees elections. State Representative Mark Fincham has a slight lead in recent polls. Now, he's admitted to being part of the crowd that marched toward the Capitol on January 6th, and he already vowed not to concede if he loses the election. For more on the Arizona primary and how the state's demographics have shifted, I'm joined now by Barbara Norender. She's a professor at the University of Arizona's School of Government and Public Policy. Thanks for being with us today. The first thing I've got to ask you, just look directly toward your camera. There we are. Thanks for joining us. It strikes me we have a front runner here who's vowing not to concede. What does that mean?
Well, that means that there'll be controversy over the outcome, particularly if Lake does not win. She said she would sort of, which means there's going to be controversy, which could actually perhaps hurt the Republican candidate in the November election if it drags on.
I mean, that is no small detail considering where the country is right now. How have Arizona's demographics shifted in recent years that may help us understand which of these candidates have a real shot, not just at their primaries, but at winning in a general election?
So what is probably the main concern right now is the suburbs of Phoenix. So which includes Phoenix is 60% of the voters in Arizona. So the way that Maricopa County goes has a great deal of influence. So in 2020, the story was that some of the Republican suburban voters in the Phoenix area either voted for Biden or simply didn't vote in the presidential race, and that's why Biden was able to win in this that election. So the question is whether or not that was a temporary deviation by Republicans in the 2020 election, or is this a stronger trend to do better in Maricopa County and therefore also to do better statewide?
And we're just having a few technical glitches with your audio there, so apologies to our viewers. But based on that, what then are the leading issues unique to people in Arizona right now?
Well, based on geography, the border issues are something that often comes up much more in Arizona than they might elsewhere, particularly on the Republican side. So there's a discussion of finishing the border wall, using some perhaps high-tech security, prevent more undocumented immigrants from moving into the United States.
What's also interesting is Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema we've watched her go from really a progressive icon in Arizona to really being called an obstacle in Washington to President Biden's agenda. Give us some insight into why you believe she may have had to shift and transform.
Well, the state of Arizona is at best purple and still probably a red state. And so she only about what's happening with the Democratic supporters, but also to try to maintain some support among Republican voters and Republican business leaders.
You know, Arizona was a major focus of former President Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. We had numerous recounts there. They concluded President Biden won fairly, yet we have candidates still endorsing that lie that there was fraud. How are those candidates and other Republicans, or why are they fixated on that election integrity? Does that seem to be working for them?
Well, I think we'll know a little bit more after what comes out today, but it has been a concern, and there were some legislation introduced into the state legislature to tighten some of the voting rules. But again, there are a couple of candidates who are saying they won't concede if they lose, and there has been a lot of discussion about how the vote is done by mail, how it is being done, and how it's being counted, even though the public officials have been trying very hard to get out the message about what are all the measures that prevent widespread voter fraud.
Yeah, well, we know you'll be watching this, and we will continue to examine this closely as folks head to the polls and tell us what's most important to them. Professor Barbara Noranda, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Karen Taylor Robeson joins me now. She's hoping to secure the Republican nomination tonight for Arizona governor. My first question to you is, what is the most important issue facing Arizona Republicans right now?
The most important issue is the border. Our southern border is being overrun, and Arizona is on the front lines of what has become a 50-state border crisis because of the disastrous immigration policies of Joe Biden.
And what about the issues on the border will you fix that's different to how things are currently being done?
Well, I received the endorsement of the U.S. Border Patrol Council because they've seen my plan. I have a tough 6-point plan on my website, KarenForArizona.com, and they know that it is a plan that can be implemented, and they know that I'm the candidate capable of implementing it, given my 30 years of track record in the private sector as a business executive, as a lawyer, and as a small business owner. So they have put their faith and trust in me, and they know I will do everything that a governor can do to secure the border and to protect the people and property of Arizona.
It's interesting you put border security at the top of your priority list when Arizona, like many other states now, have abortion laws which are in limbo after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. How is that issue and what the state may do about it playing into your campaign?
Well, in addition to the border, I'll tell you what the people are talking about in Arizona. As I travel around the state, the most important issues to them beyond border security is inflation. And we have families that are having to decide if they're going to put food on the table or gas in their tank. I've even talked to people who have trouble filling their gas tank up to go to work. So those are the real issues that are at play here in Arizona, and I believe across the country. More and more people are having buyer's remorse over Joe Biden in the White House. Regarding Roe v. Wade, I absolutely believe that the U.S. Supreme Court did the right thing, returning this issue to the states where it belongs. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that Roe v. Wade didn't resolve the issue. It only exacerbated it because you had 9 justices essentially taking a political question and putting it into a legal realm. It's a political question, and it is long overdue to come back to the states and let the people decide.
And what further action on abortion rights do you support?
Well, Arizona is a pro-life state. I'm pro-life. But everywhere I go and everybody I talk to, I say that we have to do as much for the woman as we do and care as much for women as we do about their unborn child. And I will lead and foster a culture of life, and we will take care of women. But right now, like I said earlier, the biggest issue facing us is inflation. It is touching everybody. Mother, father, workers, everybody, because the cost of everything is going up. I've had many people call me and complain about the cost of milk, the cost of eggs, scarcity of things. And so those issues are impacting everybody.
Another issue that riles people up is the previous presidential election, how it went down, and what can be done about it. Your opponent, Kari Lake, the former local anchor, claimed in a campaign speech last week, quote, "We're already seeing some stealing going on," end quote. It's just the latest in a series of unfounded claims she's making about the previous presidential election. Are you concerned that undermining confidence in the electoral process could lead to more issues, as we saw in Georgia's special Senate election?
You know, what Kari Lake is saying is it really disqualifies her to hold elected office. She is undermining the election before the votes are even counted. I started out this year at 0 in the polls. She was at 43. And my campaign has slowly and methodically risen in the polls. And just a few days ago, a national poll came out having me pulling ahead of her. And so she is really imploding right now. And so she is saying that she won't concede this race. And she's, trying to develop a narrative that if she loses, the only explanation can be fraud. And quite frankly, the voters of Arizona, they see a fraud. They know a fraud when they see one. With each passing day, they know that Kari Lake is an actress. She isn't who she says she is. And people are waking up to that. And that's why that is a big reason why my numbers have risen in the polls. And that's a big reason why I have all the momentum and why we're going to win this election.
To be fair, though, you have called the 2020 presidential election unfair. I'll give you a moment here to explain what you mean by that, because even after the recounts in your state, it was found that there was no untoward behavior. So how do you reassure voters that ballots are being counted lawfully?
Well, I do believe the election was unfair because it was not just the judges across this country that ushered in new rules and new laws in the weeks and months before the 2020 election. Add to that the suppression of news by the media, and I don't need to say anything other than Hunter Biden, and you know what I'm talking about, or big tech silencing conservative voices, or Mark Zuckerberg spending upwards of $500 million to increase voter turnout in heavily Democrat areas. All of those things together conspired to result in Arizona alone, 78% of our Republicans thought something was wrong with the election. But I have chosen to focus on 2022. I know my opponent, all she talks about is a stolen election in 2020, and I refuse to go there. I want to focus on 2022 because I want to keep Arizona and the Arizona governor's office in Republican hands, which allows us in 2024 to be in the best position possible to get rid of Joe Biden and his disastrous immigration policy and his disastrous economic policy.
And just to be clear, do you commit to abide by the results of this primary?
I have said on the record, yes.
Karen Taylor Robeson, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Kansas has become the first state to allow voters to weigh in on local abortion policy after the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v Wade. A new question on primary ballots today asks residents to vote on whether to amend the state constitution to remove a protected right to abortion. This added measure led to a surge in early voting ahead of today's primary. Abortion is currently legal in Kansas for up to 22 weeks of a pregnancy. If residents vote to remove the protection, the state's Republican-controlled legislature could enact a near-total ban on the procedure. Meanwhile, in Kentucky, an appeals court has reinstated a near-total abortion ban that took effect when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. The decision overturns a ruling from last month that put two proposed abortion bans on hold while the court determines if they violate Kentucky's constitution. As of Tuesday, all abortions in Kentucky are banned except when the health of the mother is at risk. The state's two abortion clinics say they are now canceling all scheduled appointments in compliance with the law. Kentucky Supreme Court says it will appeal the ruling. A pair of Republican members of Congress are facing primary fights in the state of Washington today. We are in the mix and on the ground with two incumbents who voted for former President Trump's impeachment. How is that playing out? You're streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
a generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
I identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me?
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Two Republicans who voted to impeach former President Trump are facing tough primaries today in Washington state. Representative Jaime Herrera Beutler is facing off against Trump-backed candidate Joe Kent in the state's 3rd district. Kent is a former Green Beret who has repeated the former president's falsehoods about the 2020 election. And in central Washington's 4th district, Representative Dan Newhouse is also facing a candidate endorsed by Mr. Trump after voting to impeach him. In this case, it's Lauren Culp. You see him on the right. For more, we're joined now by David Gutman, who is a political reporter for the Seattle Times, and he joins us from, I kid you not, Battleground, Washington. David, great to have you with us. My first question for you is about Representative Jaime Herrera Beutler facing apparently an uphill battle of keeping her seat after being one of these few Republicans who voted to impeach the former president. What can you tell us about why her schedule seems to be relatively light considering this fight ahead?
Well, yeah, she is in a tough race here and in a struggle to get through the primary, which is today. She has been having a relatively light in-person campaign schedule. Just, she's been advertising and buying ads, but, there are no in-person town halls, very few in-person events. It seems like there might be fears of, of being shouted down or kind of confrontations at in-person events, but it's been a pretty light schedule.
And our viewers should be aware, as a working reporter, you're out in some of the restaurants, whether they be high-end or fast food, as the cars zoom by. Just so our viewers give you some slack here. He's a working man. Speaking of those who voted to impeach the former president, Representative Dan Newhouse is one of those 10 Republicans. Most don't think of Washington as a necessarily conservative state, but how is that decision impacting voters' choices?
Sure. Well, on the whole, you're right. Washington is not a conservative state, but there's a pretty deep divide. Basically, the Cascade Mountains run down the middle of the state, and east of the Cascades is solidly Republican territory, and that's where Dan Newhouse is. And both him and Jamie Herrera Butler are facing crowded fields of far-right challengers who have challenged them, primarily over their votes to impeach Donald Trump. And we're going to see today, with today's primary, whether they'll have enough support to survive. One thing that's interesting about Washington's primaries is that there's no Democratic primary and Republican primary. Every candidate is in one big primary, and the top two vote getters, regardless of party, move on to the general election. And that's something that actually could work to the advantage of the two incumbents. They could get enough, moderate Republican and even Democratic support that they could be able to fend off the far-right challengers.
David, that's a really important distinction you make there when it comes to which voters are enticed and encouraged to come to the polls and what the candidates are encouraged to suggest and support in order to court them. A special election is being held for Washington's Secretary of State. What can you tell us about that race and what it tells us about what's happening in the country?
Well, it's a special election because Washington, as I said, is a Democratic state, but for many years had a Republican Secretary of State. She was a quite moderate Republican and, in fact, left office to take a job in the Biden administration doing election security. She was replaced with a Democratic appointee. So the current Secretary of State is a Democrat named Steve Hobbs. He's facing a crowded field of challengers, a couple moderate Republicans, a couple Republicans who are very extreme in their, how they discuss the 2020 election and throwing around false statements about, fraud in the 2020 election. I think what we'll be telling is which Republican manages to get through to the general election. I think it's very likely that the Democrat Steve Hobbs will make it through, but who his opponent is might tell us a little bit about the state of the electorate.
Certainly, we'll continue to watch this closely. David Gutman, going where the people are, no matter where that is. We appreciate your time today. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we will take a very short break now, which means you have a few minutes to download the free CBS News app on all your devices. You can catch live local coverage from across the country from all of our CBS stations. And while you're there, check out Paramount Plus. We've got a mountain of content for you as well, including your favorite shows, movies, and sports.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before. That's correct. Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Actor Kevin Costner has endorsed Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney in her bid for re-election. Take a look at this. On Monday, Cheney tweeted this image of the Yellowstone star wearing a shirt saying, "I'm for Liz Cheney," as you see. The post was captioned, "Real men put country over party." The endorsement comes as recent polls show Cheney trailing behind Trump-endorsed GOP primary candidate Harriet Hageman. Wyoming's primary election is scheduled for August 16th. And that does it for us for tonight. You can stream Red and Blue, though, Monday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes, you can stream them anytime on the CBS News website at cbsnews.com/red and blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the
And
past?
to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct. Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
when weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me?
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Americans across the country react to the Supreme Court's ruling on abortion. For continuing coverage anywhere, stream on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zach. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's a look at the top stories we're following right now. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi arrives in Taiwan despite warnings from China. How her visit is being received at home and overseas. The U.S. strike on a top al-Qaeda leader reveals Afghanistan may still be a hot spot for terror groups. What we're learning about the Taliban-controlled country. And voters head to the polls in 5 states, setting the stage for November's general elections. We have correspondents across the country with more on the key races to watch.